This presentation is brand new. I created it earlier this year, and we're going to talk about the 7 superpowers of men and women, but at the end, we're also going to talk about 7 levels of male allyship and how male allyship ties into the 7 superpowers and vice versa. This is the very first time I've presented this to an audience. So you are, yeah. All right, with that, are you all in? Okay, excellent. So 7 superpowers. Oh, I like the graphics, actually. I've never seen these graphics before. Love them. I have a feeling the whole presentation is going to be AI generated. All right, we'll roll with it. So 7 superpowers. So I was asked by Diversity Woman magazine a couple years ago to contribute to an article on superpowers of women, not necessarily 7, but just general superpowers. And so given that my research is in leadership, gender, DEI, it actually was fairly easy to sit down and come up with superpowers. But then I really started putting thought into it. So I contributed to the article, and then I thought, there really are 7 key superpowers distinct to women that serves us well in our careers. And then, of course, that also led to me thinking about men. Well, do men have superpowers? Yes, they do have superpowers. They actually have an equal amount, 7, that are distinct to them. Now, these superpowers are based on a combination of how our brains are wired, our neuroanatomy, but also how we're socialized to behave as men and women in society. So you put these together, and these are skills that are very gender specific and tend to be innate, but the good news is they can be developed. Okay, so gender culture. I like to start off with this slide. I think it explains gender culture nicely. The mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go to Gap and buy a pair of pants. As you can see, the male's the blue line, female's the red line. 6 minutes, $33, he has his pants, mission accomplished. Over 3.5 hours, over $800 later, she has those same pants. So, of course, this is a whimsical look at gender differences. Of course, not all women love to shop like this. Of course, this is laden with stereotypes. I understand that, but it's meant to be a whimsical look. So, but let's take a more serious look at gender differences. So men and women are raised in different cultures, biologically, socially, and even culturally. We have raised in different environments. We receive very different messages from a very early age that we carry into the workplace as adults. So these differences are not about rights and wrongs. It's simply about difference. It's like silverware and chopsticks. One's not right, one's not wrong, they're just different. We have differences in how we approach virtually every aspect of business, though. How we work within an organizational structure. Do we prefer hierarchy or flat? How we conduct our meetings. Do we have a meeting before the meeting? Or do we just show up to the meeting expecting to dialogue with everyone? How we network with each other, how we interpret information, how we process information, how we communicate, how we work in teams, solve problems, take risks, and even how we lead. We have fundamental differences. It's these differences, which is exactly why we need more gender-balanced leadership, for the simple fact that women think differently and behave differently. So that leads to, as Michael said very nicely, diversity leads to more outcomes, more innovation, better performance, and a whole host of other positive benefits for companies. There's mounds of data on that. So, but the difference we need to be aware of, value, and celebrate. Okay, so we're going to talk about emotional intelligence today because many of these superpowers are rooted in our EQ. But what is emotional intelligence? It's how we perceive and express ourselves. It's how we develop and maintain our relationships, how we cope with challenges, even how we manage stress and make decisions, and also how we use that emotional information to guide our thinking and action. So you put this all together, and it's essentially your people skills, right? It's how well you can connect to other people. And we know that people who are more successful in connecting tend to be more successful in life. They tend to meet their own needs and goals and accomplishments easier. So, I have a question for you. Let's see by show of hands, which gender is more emotionally intelligent? Let's see a show of hands. How many of you think men are more emotionally intelligent than women? Not one hand, not even the men in the room? Not even the AV guys in the back? Oh no, they're shaking their heads. Not one guy is. Now it could be that you're in a female-dominated environment, right? Maybe you're afraid to raise your hand. That's okay, that's understandable. We got you. Okay, how many of you think that women are more emotionally intelligent than men? Let's see a show of hands. Okay, I'd say that's like 100% of the room. You're all wrong. It's a bit of a trick question, sorry. In millions of people who's taken emotional intelligence assessments worldwide, men and women are actually equally emotionally intelligent. We are equal overall, but you knew there was a but, right? We have gender-specific EQ strengths. And here's what they are. So in general, so this was actually based on my dissertation research. I was really curious to see how I looked at leadership and EQ from a gendered perspective. And I was really curious to see how it fell out and how it impacted career advancement of women and perceptions as well. So in general, women tend to score higher than men in areas of empathy, social responsibility, and interpersonal relationships. Those three key areas of emotional intelligence. Men tend to score higher than women in areas of assertiveness, stress tolerance, and self-regard. What's another word for self-regard? You said confidence. You got it. Confidence. What's really interesting about this data, I think fascinating about this data, is this is also how we're socialized to behave. Men are socialized to be confident and assertive, even if they're not naturally that way, right? What if you're not a naturally assertive guy, but you're expected to be, you're pressured to be? Women are socialized to be empathetic and great at relationships. What if empathy is your strongest trait? It wasn't mine, actually. When I've taken multiple EQ assessments, it's actually my lowest. And it's something I've had to work on. So I have actually had men and women come up to me after presentations and say, you know, Sean, I'm actually higher in the other gender traits. And that is perfectly normal. But when you look at millions of people, this is how the trends tend to fall out. So keep these in mind because these two play into the superpowers. Okay, let's start with men. 7 superpowers of men. I like the Batman there. Like I said, I have not seen these graphics before. Okay, I'll list them all first. So it looks like we're going to list them all first, and then get into each of them. So transactional leadership, I've put on here for a reason, and I'll explain why that's on here. Risk-taking, confidence, assertiveness, stress tolerance, what we consider convergent problem solving, and also decisiveness. Okay, let's take them one by one. Transactional leadership. So transactional leadership is based on an even exchange of transactions between leader and follower. It's also called quid pro quo. It's very common in business and politics. So for example, if someone says, Jack, if you finish this project on time and within budget, I'll give you the next promotion. That's a quid pro quo leadership. Exchanging political votes for lavish dinners at the state dinners, lavish state dinners or trips. That's transactional leadership. A student completing a homework assignment and a teacher giving a grade is transactional leadership. Having your child finish their vegetables before they get dessert is transactional. You do this, you're going to get that. So it's an extremely common type of leadership, again, extremely common in business and politics, and it's associated with male style of leadership. So this style of leadership is linked to competitiveness, it's linked to hierarchical control, And it's also based on quick decision making. So let's take a deeper look at this. There's pros and cons. So the pros of transactional leadership: it's short-term, it's goal-oriented, and it does the trick, and there's a time and place for it. Extrinsic motivated, though. So you may receive pay, bonus, promotion, prizes, or even winning a competition in exchange for a behavior. It's very contingent reward-based, performance-based, focused on the now and the present, because, again, it's short-term. Clear instructions, expectations, roles, rewards, measurement should be part of it, and generally based on positive, constructive transactions. However, there are some cons to this type of leadership that we should be aware of. It is short-term focused, so it's not focused on long-term company goals. It's not based on intrinsic motivation, which is generally having purpose in my job, growth in my job, passion, enjoyment, fun. It's more based on those extrinsic motivators. It's focused on the transaction itself, not as much on employee development. It doesn't rely on very little employee input. Punishment, blame, criticism, negative reinforcement oftentimes comes with this type of leadership. It has limited creativity, or can have limited creativity, and manager involvement varies from laissez-faire, like just lay back and let it happen, to active management. So again, there's a time and place, but this is a very distinct leadership style that has been very effective in business and politics and has been very effective for men. Okay, so for each of these superpowers, I'm going to give you suggestions after every one. So suggestions here is assess whether transactional leadership is best given the situation. Do you need to focus on the customers? Do you need to focus more on long-term? Do you want to focus more on employee development? If so, this may not be the most appropriate, but you need to determine that. Actively monitor and communicate progress between leader and follower, and create a positive transaction to help drive that performance. Okay, superpower number 2, risk-taking. So this probably doesn't surprise most of you, right? So actually, I want to read you a little context here around risk-taking before I get into the question here. So our brain wiring has a lot to do with this one, as does testosterone levels. So it's no secret that men tend to take more risks than women do, or have a more propensity to take risks. Okay, so let's look at the question. So when asked to do something you've never done, how do you respond? So let me hear from a couple of you. Let's hear from a male and a female. If you're asked to do something you've never done, so let's say your boss comes to you, here's a new role, new project, how would you respond to that? Yes, in the back. Okay. Okay. Would you tell them that you don't have experience in that, or you haven't done that before? Okay. 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 So let's hear from one of the gentlemen. How would you approach that exact same scenario? Yes, sir. Okay, these two were not plants, by the way. You couldn't have answered that any better. So, before suggestions, okay. So when it comes to risk, women tend to be transparent and honest about what they don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. So oftentimes we will have that reaction and say, boss, I've never done this, but I'll give it a try. Or we can bring in a consultant, maybe work with another department, but I'm just not sure. So she is honest about what she doesn't know. He will say, boss, I got it, I'm on it. He doesn't know how to do it. But what does he do? He goes and figures it out. Now, you all have Google. We have more information at our fingertips today than ever before, and we have AI, of course, to help us. So, more often than not, if we said, boss, I got it, I'm on it more often, and go figure it out, more often than not, it's going to work out. So let's just say it doesn't work out. Let's say it doesn't work out like you'd hoped it does. What do you get in return? You got it. You get valuable experience. So the next time that situation rolls around, you're going to be more equipped, you're going to recognize it faster, and address it better. So even if it doesn't work out, it's still a win-win. So, but men don't know any more than women do. They just act as if they do. And I have to tell you, I teach, I live, breathe, eat, this data. I'm a professor, I speak on it, I consult on it. Of everything I can tell you today, this is probably the most valuable piece of advice I can give you. So men tend to be more comfortable just jumping in and see what happens, and then figuring it out later. Women tend to be much more calculated in our risk-taking. Now, that's not necessarily a negative, but it can be a negative if you say no all the time, right? So the world needs more women to say yes. Take that risk. Try it. You will gain experience. It's more often than not, it's going to work out in your favor. This has worked for men for decades, right? It's an effective strategy, right? It's very effective. So men aren't necessarily lying when they say, boss, I got it, I'm on it. They're just not admitting what they don't know. So nobody said you have to admit everything you don't know in the workplace. So that's something just to keep in mind. So next time you're approached with this, say, boss, I got it, I'm on it. So there are downsides of risk, of course. If you don't think through them, you can't always just jump in and think later. But there has been countless examples in our history of great accomplishments. Let's see, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison. It goes on and on and on by taking risk. Jump in and figure it out later often works, and of course you need to do a careful risk assessment. It can't, of course, harm you physically, harm your family, your colleagues, blow up buildings, things like that. Okay, but this is a superpower for men. Number 3, superpower, confidence. So confidence is the definition, respecting ourself while understanding and accepting one's strengths and weaknesses. What's it look like in the workplace? Folks with high confidence would exude feelings of inner strength and self-confidence. They're comfortable with themselves, which translates to increased performance, a willingness to confidently admit their mistakes, and a positive outlook on their future and even their current capabilities. So confidence, I want to read you another quote here. The Confidence Code, by the way, is a fantastic book. So this is what the Confidence Code says. Confidence can be boiled down to 3 basic elements. 1, think less. 2, take action. And 3, be authentic. It boils down to those 3 things. So there is a UC Berkeley study that has gotten a lot of attention that shows that confidence is more important than competence. So when it comes to leadership, men are more confident, but women are more competent. So we put so much time into building our competence in a certain area. Of course, you have to be competent to do your job, right? But oftentimes, women undervalue confidence and overvalue competence. So confidence is extremely powerful, and again, the UC Berkeley study showed that it's more important oftentimes. There's also a study out of UC Santa Barbara that's also interesting. They examined self-perceptions and found that men consistently overestimate their abilities and performance. And what do you think women do? Right, consistently underestimate their abilities and performance. So, okay. Here's suggestions for confidence. Have conversations with, if you want to boost this, by the way, have confidence with people you respect and are close to. Ask them what they see as your strengths and weaknesses. This will help you to reconcile between your own perceptions and beliefs and what others actually see. Okay, number 4 superpower, assertiveness. So this is another EQ strength. It's communicating your feeling, beliefs, and thoughts openly. What's it look like in the workplace? So someone high in assertiveness defends their personal rights and values in a socially acceptable manner. They'd find the right language at the right time to express themselves. They'd articulate themselves clearly and confidently, and stand up for themselves and for others. Suggestions for assertiveness. Reach out to someone this week to express your needs and ask for their help. It could be help with juggling your work-life balance. It could be help in building better connections, or even managing your stress. So one thing I wanted to say about assertiveness is men, we also know this from data, men raise their hands and speak more often than women do, both in school and at work. A Princeton study showed that when women are in the minority, so in a male-dominated environment, women speak 75% less than men in meetings. 75%. This means that men get most of the floor time to communicate their wants and needs. In addition, men generally care less about being judged than women do, about what others think, and about people-pleasing than women, as she eloquently stated in the back. So they're more freed up to speak their minds. Okay, superpower number 5, stress tolerance. So this is the ability to handle various levels of stress coming from multiple sources. What's it look like in the workplace? So someone who can handle high levels of stress would do it effectively without losing productivity. Ability to think and speak clearly in emotionally charged situations. I think this skill is, we definitely have a dearth of this skill nowadays, right? Have you noticed that since COVID, people seem to have less patience than before? And are definitely more emotionally charged. They'd be able to handle a hostile person without lashing out in return, and staying composed and unflappable, even in trying moments or trying times. So stress tolerance, again, is related to testosterone levels, plays a lot into this superpower. So believing that one can manage and influence situations in a positive manner, men tend to outperform women. Again, brain anatomy and hormones play largely here. So men are able to remove themselves from situations, control their emotions, and worry less. Just an anecdote for you, as I have a friend who is transgender, from female to male. And what he shared with me, it was years ago, but I always remember it because I thought it was fascinating, is when he started taking testosterone, he said the chatter in his brain went away. It just went away. And his whole life as a female, that chatter was there, and it went away. So again, it's anecdotal, but I think that's a really powerful testament to the power of hormones. So stress tolerance is a superpower for men, again, largely related to hormones. So suggestions here if you want to increase your stress tolerance, and this is for men or women, by the way. Do someone a favor. This is one of my favorites. It allows you to shift from being a problem sufferer to a problem solver. So it shifts your perspective because you're focusing on helping them. So that helps you manage your stress better. Okay, superpower number 6, problem solving. So this one, there's 2 types of problem solving, convergent and divergent. So when men go to solve a problem, they're like the laser beam on the left-hand side. So they focus on the problem like a laser, they solve it quickly, they're not distracted by extraneous variables, and it's very quick and efficient. It's called convergent problem solving. Now, there's, of course, upsides and downsides to both of these, which I'll share with you. So the upside of this is it's quick and efficient. It's also very helpful in a complex, fast-paced environment. The downside is if you're too quick to make decisions, you may miss other opportunities that would have been better. But you just jumped right in and figured it out later, right? Kind of goes along with the risk-taking a little bit. So, but that is a superpower for men. So suggestions here. Determine which approach is best given the situation. Actually, let me go ahead and I'll do the female one while we're here. So the other type of problem solving is called divergent problem solving. It's like a radar screen. So when women go to make a decision or solve a problem, they pick up clues from their environment. They consider the impact on themselves, on their team, on the company, on the client, or the customer? How's it going to affect everything? And then they calculate that, prioritize it, and make a decision. So the upside of this, well, the downside of this is it takes longer than the convergent style, right? But the upside of it is the chances of having to repeat that problem again or solve that problem again are much less because you've thought it through thoroughly the first time. So pros and cons to both. So my suggestions determine which approach is best given the situation. In a lot of our organizations today, we just default to the laser style, the convergent problem solving, and we don't spend enough time, I think, doing the divergent problem solving. But there's a time and place for both of these. Second, we need both approaches to solve problems, and we need to value both approaches. Does that make sense? Okay. Superpower number 7, decisiveness. So decisiveness is partly linked to the convergent problem solving we just talked about. Read you a quote here. So men, focus on the issue. Don't get distracted. We talked about that. So the point I want to make here is men have the keen ability to make a decision and move on very quickly. And most men spend little time overthinking or ruminating about past decisions. That is a key difference based on how our brains are wired. We know that women ruminate more than men do. And that's not always a bad thing, by the way. This enables them to act quickly when the next decision needs to be made. So brain wiring helps a lot with this superpower. So this is interesting. Decisiveness is a trait or characteristic that describes people who are biased towards action, even though that typo, I did not make that typo. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think that was in there before. Even though they face uncertainty. So biased towards action is the key phrase here. So again, it goes back, it's that decisiveness, it's that quick thinking, it kind of ties into the risk-taking again. But even if you don't know how to do it, you do it anyway. Suggestions for decisiveness. Recognize that speed and action may not always be the first response. It is very effective many times, but not always. Take time to evaluate a situation and think it through when needed, and reflect on past learnings to improve future decisions. Okay. And by the way, we're going to talk about biases, and I didn't mention this up front, but there are biases that go along with these superpowers, right? So we make assumptions about these as well. AI plays into our biases, of course, but biases lowers the power of the superpowers. It brings the superpower down. So we will talk, as a group, we're going to do a table exercise where we're going to talk about what are some of the biases here and how we can address those. Okay, 7 superpowers of women. I'll just bring them all up here for you in case you want to take a photo. Okay, so transformational leadership. Now, I'm sure you've all heard that term. Transactional and transformational leadership styles have been around for decades. There's been dozens, if not hundreds, of academic studies on these topics. And these are the only 2 types of leadership styles, by the way, linked to gender. But there are dozens of leadership styles out there. But these 2 have been associated with gender. So transformational leadership, communication skills, empathy, interpersonal relationships, those are all EQ skills. Divergent problem solving, intuition. We're going to talk about that even in a business setting. And grit. Okay, so transformational leadership is very different than transactional quid pro quo. This is based on collective problem solving, collective decision making, collaboration, communication, and it focuses on values, ethics, emotions, and long-term goals. So this style of leadership has been associated with female leaders, female style of leading. So it's also been shown, and again, hundreds of studies have been done on transformational leadership, but it's shown to be the leadership style that are complex, fast-paced, organizations today is what people are seeking, is more of the transformational. They want, the old command and control style, most employees don't want that. Most employees. It does work in certain settings, but most people want to be collaborative with their managers. They want to have the communication. They want to focus on values and emotions and meaning and purpose. So that transformational leadership helps do that. So how can you be a better transformational leader? So this is for the men and the women in the room. Maximize your natural transformational characteristics by leveraging empathy, leveraging your relationships, your listening skills. Listening absolutely helps you be a better transformational leader, and your teamwork or collaboration. If you focus on these 4 areas, it will help you be a better transformational leader. Okay, there's also interesting data that shows that individuals who are effective transformational leaders also score high in emotional intelligence. So it is all linked, it is all related in some form or fashion. Okay, let's look at communication skills. So this image just makes me laugh every time I see it. Let me give you some context around it. So women's brains have more connections between the 2 hemispheres, which result in both verbal articulation and multitasking ability. Does that surprise any of the women in the room? Not at all, right? Not at all. There are also other brain differences, and I don't have time today to go into all of them, but a big one is more connections between the 2 that help with the communication skills. So when women listen, they focus on the relationship more than the outcome or the goal or the task. They focus on the relationship. So, and are busy picking up both verbal and nonverbal cues, so smiling, nodding, head tilts, eye contact. So in this graphic here, look at all the communication that's going on between these 2 women. Mostly nonverbal, right? You don't have that to the same extent with men in general. So verbal abilities and listening with intent are skills that women already have within them. So that's why this is a superpower for women. Okay, let's look at suggestions for communication skills. Utilize your verbal articulation. Words, your choice of words, how you say them, I think we all know are very powerful. Pay attention to your nonverbal cues, which is the majority of our communication. So a story is, there was a pharmaceutical company, and there was a leader of the group, and I think it was a female, she had a team, and they were asked to witness 2 managers behind a glass talking. And so the team is watching this, and then when the conversation is done, the facilitator asked, what did you observe? And no one really picked up anything, out of the ordinary. And one of the women walked up to her after the event and said, "Excuse me." She goes, "They don't really like each other very much, do they?" And the facilitator said, "How do you know that?" And she had picked up on these nonverbal clues they were giving each other. No one else in the group picked up on it. But the reason she didn't say anything is because she assumed everyone else saw the same thing she did, and they did not. So for women, this is a superpower. Don't discount what you notice, and don't assume others are seeing what you are seeing. And of course, listening with the intent to learn. I think is something we all could do better. Okay, 3rd superpower is empathy. Empathy is being able to read the emotional needs of others and respond in an appropriate manner. What's it look like in the workplace? So someone high in empathy would frame messages differently depending on the audience, right? They'd be in tune to the person. Collaboration by understanding emotional makeup of their team members and know that everyone has different needs. They'd consider others' feelings in decision making. And they'd even select the most appropriate means of communication. Now, you may not think that that is a sign of empathy, but it is. So let me ask you, we have more ways to communicate now than ever. When you communicate, let's say you've just met someone like a new colleague, do you ever ask them how they prefer to be communicated? Okay, I've seen some heads nod. Okay, Some do. Most of us don't. How do you think most of us communicate to other people? Yes, I heard it. We generally like to communicate to others in our own preference. So if you're a texter, you're going to be texting everyone, right? But if your preference is email and you keep getting texts at 10 o'clock at night from your colleague, that's going to put a burr in your saddle, right? You're not going to be too happy about that. Okay, so let's say your communication, you prefer to pick up the phone or have a face-to-face, but instead you're always emailing. So knowing the communication preferences of our colleagues, it's a little, you may think it's a little thing, but it goes a long way. Take the time to ask. That is a sign of empathy. It's a sign that, one, we notice that someone else may have a different communication style, and it also says we care. So suggestions to improve your empathy, if this is an area that you want to bolster. Don't judge, give advice, or interrupt when someone's speaking. Just listen. One of the great analogies I attended years ago was a listening skills course, and the instructor described it as like grabbing the mic from someone else. So imagine when someone else is talking, are you always yanking the mic from their hand to say what you want to say? Are you interrupting them to inject what you want to inject? So I always visualize that, and it's helped me actually to try not to jump in, to try not to judge or interrupt others, and wait till they're done talking before before that mic gets passed. So let people say what's on their mind and express their feelings about what they're experiencing. Okay, superpower number 4, interpersonal relationships. So, and I didn't have a slide on this, but I've spoken to it in years past. You probably don't remember. It's been a while. But we get very different messages as children through the games we play, for example. So let me ask you all. What are common games that boys play? Sports. What was that? Risk? Okay. Video games, war, battleship, I heard. Oh, trucks, car games. Okay, good. Anything else that either you played or your sons played or your nephews played? Okay, Legos, building blocks. Lincoln Logs, do they even have those anymore? Lincoln Logs. So, now with the exception of Legos and Lincoln Logs, actually. So, I heard sports, I heard video games, I heard race car games, there's military games, there's zombie games, right? Boys, the lessons boys learn very early on is that competition is the most important thing. Winning and losing. So these games that boys play are centered on winning and losing. Boys also learn other important messages from these early games. They learn that you have to sometimes play with people you don't like. Do I have to have Johnny on the team? Yeah, you do. Take him and show him the ropes. They also learn that when the game's over, you're friends again. So boys can claw each other's eyes out in the game and happily go for pizza and Cokes afterwards, right? You've all seen that. So these are really important lessons boys get subconsciously from the games they play. Now, what are some of the games girls play? Dolls, Barbie, house. Did I help military? Military, did you say? Oh, teacher, God. Dress up, good one. Cooking. Tea parties, I think I heard whispered in the back. Yes, women do play sports too. So for the most part, so think of these games. So the games that girls play, they get very different messages than what the boys are getting. From these games, they're not taught that winning and losing is the most important thing. They're taught that relationships are the most important thing from these games. Girls are taught to value and preserve relationships at all costs. Relationships are important. So there's no winning and losing. So for those of you who played Barbies, have you ever lost at a game of Barbies? Sometimes. I love it. If you have, you're a really bad Barbie player. So these games are about process. So girls are taught that the process, the journey, is actually more important than the outcome, or winning, right? Very different lessons. Now, caveat, let's go back to your comment. Caveat, not all boys and girls play these games. There are plenty of boys who want to play dress up or cooking, and there are plenty of girls who play sports, for example. And then also, I have gotten the question a few times, but for non-binary individuals, just in case you're curious, they would still be subjective to socialized pressures on our behaviors, but would likely have traits of both. But there's little to no data out there on socialization's impact on non-binary individuals. So I diverted there because I think that's an important setup for relationships. This is why, this is an EQ trait, but it's why women score higher than men, tend to score higher than men in interpersonal relationships. So what's it look like in the workplace? So they'd be able to read someone high in relationships, read nonverbal body language easily, build rapport easily, manage and mediate conflict. Our relationships would be characterized by trust and compassion as well. Okay, I think I wanted to say one thing about that. Bear with me. Again, this is a new presentation, so I want to make sure I get some important quotes in here. Okay, so suggestions for relationships is regularly check in. Ask how others are doing. Probe beyond the fine, if you can, if you have the time. Pick up on that nonverbal language and what they aren't saying. Probe further to understand how they're doing. So that's suggestions for both men and women to bolster relationships. Problem solving, we did talk about. So again, now women's superpower is the divergent problem solving. It's the radar screen on the right. So that's a key difference there. Okay, suggestions for, where are we at? Problem solving here. Same suggestions as before. Determine which approach is best given the situation. We need to value both approaches, and we need both are perfectly good ways of thinking. Intuition. So intuition is often an undervalued and unspoken trait at work. But what women see is often different than what men see, as the story alluded to this morning or earlier. So women pick up on nonverbal cues, what's not being said, and can sense tension between people. So this is a key trait. I can't tell you how many times I've heard women say, well, I just had a feeling. Or how did you know that was going to work out? Just my gut, my little voice. That's your intuition speaking. So again, this is a trait we don't talk about, but don't undervalue this trait. It's incredibly powerful to help serve as your North Star and your guide. And it's a superpower for women. So leverage that. Even in the workplace, it's important to use that. Suggestions here to bolster your intuition. Don't assume others see what you're seeing. And don't be afraid to speak up, too, if you're seeing things, because, again, others may not be seeing that. So you need to be your assertiveness skills. Don't discount what you notice, and value and listen to that little voice, because it's always there. Sometimes we don't listen to it, but it's always there. Okay, and superpower number 7 for women, grit. So is anyone familiar with Angela Duckworth's book? Okay, let's see a show of hands. How many of you have read that book? Okay, a few of you. She has a great TED Talk, followed up by a book on grit, and basically shows that people who are most resilient and persevere over the long term are the grittiest, and those people tend to have higher performance and more accomplishments. So in recent years, a lot's been written and spoken about grit. We know that people with stamina and perseverance are likely to accomplish their goals. In women's lives, the reason this is a superpower, in women's lives, we are used to juggling multiple priorities, right? And also coming up against barriers in the workplace at the same time. Whether it's gender bias, lack of role models or sponsors, caregiving responsibilities for your children or your elders. Elder care, women have the lion's share of elder care for both their own parents and their spouse's parents, or other issues. Because of these lived experiences, women develop grit, often out of necessity. This is especially true for women of color who need to be extra gritty to overcome an added layer of racial bias on top of other priorities. So women are the engine of the world, and women have shown again and again that they just, here we go, they keep going. Right? Just keep going. That's actually my only advice for you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep going, keep persevering, have that stamina, keep that grittiness, because it does result in some great outcomes. Okay, so now I'd like to, see, we're good on time. So I'd like to put these questions to all of you at your tables. So first question is, what are the potential biases of the male superpowers? And I'll show those up here, so just so you could refer back to. And then we'll talk about potential biases of the female superpowers. And then the last question that we'll address together, most important question, is how can we shift from these biases to strengths? All right. Now, these biases, by the way, not always assessed fairly, of course. They're perceptions. Biases are very rarely based on fact. And so, again, it can impact how we view male leaders who are transactional. Risk-taking. So jump in without thinking, just reacting, being reactive versus proactive, perhaps. Maybe your ADD could be a potential bias, potential criticism. Also, anger, sexual misconduct, risky behavior can be outcomes of risk-taking, right? Taken to the extreme. So sexual harassment, as was discussed at the previous presentation, could be a bias for risk-taking. All right, how about confidence? Oh, I thought this one would be tough for y'all. Not at all. Arrogant, cocky. The A word, going back to his comment. Smug. Okay. I don't hear that word a lot, but I like it. Intimidation. Okay. Well, not necessarily. Yeah, I should have probably clarified that. It doesn't. There are positive biases as well towards all of these. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We're talking in the context of what could bring these superpowers down, what could affect the superpowers and take away. But yes, there are absolutely positive biases with both of the male and female. So confidence. So I heard smug, arrogant, cocky. What else? Condescending, maybe. Have you ever worked with someone who, they're on your team, and they walk into the room, and they're maybe 15 minutes late, and they've missed the discussion, and they come in and just take over? That's confidence in action. It's irritating, too. Yes. We've all experienced that. How about maybe narcissistic, self-centered, perhaps? Of course, confidence has many, many positive benefits, but these are potential biases. Okay, let's look at assertiveness. What's potential biases towards men who are assertive? Okay, good one. Unapproachable. Excellent. What was that? Okay, also intimidating. Say again? Closed-minded. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, disrespectful. So assertiveness, if you look at a Venn diagram, you have passiveness on one side, you have aggressiveness on the other side. Assertiveness is the Venn diagram that overlaps the two, and it's the sweet spot in the middle. But taken to an extreme, you absolutely could see some of these negative comments or biases. Anything else for assertiveness that you came up with? Okay, let's look at stress tolerance. What are potential biases for stress tolerance? Don't care, maybe. They're not stressing because they don't care, okay? Maybe no feeling, maybe they don't care. What was that? No sense of urgency? No sense of urgency, okay, good one. Let's see, maybe disengaged, maybe they're not connected. Okay, excellent. Convergent problem solving, potential biases and how we see, obviously men who do convergent problem solving or use convergent problem solving in the workplace. Yes? Okay. Did everyone hear that? Selfish, unconcerned with impact. Excuse me. A grenade thrower? It's kind of tied back to that risk taking again. Jump in and see what happens. Excellent. That's why we're doing this exercise. Thank you for bringing this up. Is we often have perceptions towards others. We may hold biases towards others that we're unaware of that affects their performance, affects their character, affects their perceptions of themselves. So yes, thank you for that, because these are superpowers. So we want to talk about how we can shift from these biases to these strengths. So let's switch to women. Same question. Let's take a few minutes and quickly address potential biases for the 7 superpowers of women. So potential biases against the female superpowers. Okay, we'll run through these a little quicker because there's one more piece we need to get to today. Transformational leadership. What could be possible bias against that? Takes too long. Ooh, say that again. Too emotional. Inefficient. Oh, wow. That's a zinger. You can't make a decision on your own because it's based on collaborative problem-solving decision-making. How about too focused on people? Perhaps. Okay, and not results enough, maybe. So those are good ones. Communication skills, potential biases. Okay. She's too chatty. Bossy. Okay, maybe not direct enough, maybe too emotional. An over-explainer. Oh my gosh. I could spend an hour just on that topic right there. We have differences in how we communicate, obviously. Men tend to get the bottom line first and then backfill later with details if needed. Women tend to explain the details first to set the foundation and then get to the bottom line. We have very different approaches there. So if you're working with mostly men, you may need to get to the bottom line first and then backfill if they ask. Okay, what else for communication skills? Talk too much, chatty, too much detail, explains too much. Gossip, okay? What was that? Say again? Oh, okay. Explain too much detail, okay? These are excellent. Empathy. What's the potential biases against empathy? People who are empathetic. Weak. Drama, maybe. Too emotional again. Too sensitive. Okay. What was that over here? Okay. Maybe not fact-based, right? Spends too much time on personal or family issues, not at work, perhaps. Since you're all in electronics, you're all in a tech industry, can you be analytical and empathetic at the same time? Absolutely. What's the perception, though? You can't. The overall perception still, it's decades this has been around. The perception is if you're an empathetic worker or leader, that you are lacking somehow in the substance department or intelligence department or an analytical department. That is absolutely a bias and not based on fact. You can be an empathetic leader and very analytical at the same time. So, but it's a pervasive one. Interpersonal relationships, what's the bias, potential biases there? You care too much, okay? Okay, favoritism, maybe nepotism towards friends, colleagues. Anything else? Unprofessional, okay. You all aren't speaking from experience, are you? Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, excellent. Divergent problem solving. What? Takes too long. Scatterbrain. Wow, these are really great. I mean, it's great that they're biases, but you're coming up with fantastic examples. What about decisiveness with this one? Perhaps she's viewed as not decisive because she's weighing different factors, taking her time, and then making a decision, right? Okay, making more problems. Okay, excellent. Intuition. What was that? Black step? Oh, got it. Okay, got it. You're winging it. Interesting. What was that over here? Doesn't use data, okay? Okay, just emotion. And again, this is a power that is undervalued and underutilized, but yet look at all the criticisms you're coming up with. And then grit. Is there a potential bias against grit? Workaholic. Okay. I hadn't thought of that one. Stubborn, maybe. Yes. Okay. Did anyone come up with not resilient enough to overcome barriers or bias? Perhaps. So even with these very positive traits, superpowers, there are biases. So here's the take home. We all have biases and stereotypes that we may not be aware of, right? But catching these biases is your emotional intelligence. It's your self-awareness. And both superpowers working together makes us stronger, both the male and the female superpowers. And as leaders, it's our job to bring these superpowers out in others and create environments that are not only inclusive, but psychologically safe. So, okay, thank you for that exercise. Here's some other suggestions how to shift from biases to strengths. Don't assume gender stereotypes that we all just talked about. Question your first impression. Take a minute to bring that unconscious to conscious. Just by pausing and asking yourself if what I'm feeling and thinking is consistent with my personal values or not. Just by pausing allows that to become conscious, and then you can address it. Hold yourself accountable for all sorts of things. Your self-reflection, your learning, using intentional words and actions, being empathetic, being an active listener, calling out bias every time you see it, making a conscious effort to seek others different from you. I love this one because oftentimes, because of the familiarity, trust, opportunity relationship. So, who do you eat lunch with all the time? Is it the same people? Is it the same people you reach out to over and over again? So when we become familiar with people who are different than us, we start to trust them. When we trust people, we give them opportunities through referrals, through resources, advice. And then finally, believe in your innate superpowers. Okay, so I want to leave you with this. There are also 7 levels of male allyship. So men, and I know there's a fair amount of men in the room here, men are absolutely critical to attaining any type of gender parity and closing leadership gender gaps in organizations. However, men's commitment spans across the spectrum, ranging from complete resistance to all in. So let's go through these. Okay, I'm going to read you. So toxic masculinity, I think we all know what that one is. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Cosby. Any others you can think of? There are some current political figures as well, but I'll let you come up with your own. But toxic masculinity is really just in a category by itself, and it's at the extreme end of allyship. So that's level 1. Level 2 is the attitude that men lose. So these men, and I think as I go through this, think about what level you may be in yourself as a male ally, or think about what level your male colleagues may be in. So level 2, these men tend to be scared, defensive, and angry. And they don't have good role models. Many men don't have good role models at all. They're shown a guy's guy as an example of a good leader. They're not shown about empathy, for example, and collaboration and communication and caring. So for the men lose level, here's some strategies. Show compassion for these men. Show them better role models. And that we're not here to blame men, we're here to help men. The next level, level 3, is it's all good. This is where an individual would have a limited perspective. They're in a bubble, and their attitude is like, hey, business is good. There's no pain here. Maybe they're feeling privileged to be in certain positions. So basically, the attitude in general is it's all good. Strategies for men at this level is they tend to need to hear more personal stories, more stories about barriers that women experience, or perhaps Me Too stories will help these men. And the goal here is, this is a journey, by the way. So the goal is to try and move men or organizations up these levels, if we can, to higher levels of support and allyship. Level 4, not my circus. So the attitude here is that this doesn't affect me, doesn't apply to me, this gender parity thing. Let the kids figure it out. So in other words, let the younger generations address this, because this doesn't apply to me. Also, they may not put their support out there or even buy into the concept of parity. Strategies here, education and awareness helps a lot, and helping men develop empathy in this area. And also asking them, how do the women in their lives view this issue and experience it? Level 5 is called the fake feminist. So at this level, men they're uncomfortable, but they're uncomfortable being uncomfortable still. They're not quite at the comfort levels of the higher levels. They say the right things, but it's not followed up in their behavior or their actions. So I personally know a lot of men in this level. For example, they advocate and support women on International Women's Day, but not any other time during the year. So they say the right things, but it's not really followed up in action. So strategies here is reflection questions. So ask yourself things like, what's your legacy? What's the history books going to say about you? How can you make a bigger impact than just yourself? And also, men at this level have to do a risk calculation. So you have to sit down and really think about, will you be accepted by your female colleagues? You may lose some male friends based on backlash or teasing you've experienced, or even the bro code that is pervasive in some male-dominated industries. Also, are you comfortable in your masculinity? So risk calculations at this level, men need to go through these and to determine what's needed to move up that next level. Level 6 is ready, set, go. So at this level, men want to support, they want to be an ally, they just don't know what to do. And there are also many men at this level as well. So what do we do here? Give them data, give them studies, give them advice, tips that they can use to help show them and support them in their allyship. And then level 7 is the top level, and that is the we win attitude. These men are full advocates, full supporters. They get it, they understand it, And we see it in their behaviors every day. So here's the key point with these levels. If we can target levels, the fake feminists, ready, set, go, we win, 5 through 7, we can really move the needle on gender parity and DEI. Because these men, and there's a lot of them here, they're ready, they just need a little nudging, they need some education, they need some support. Now, if we can move levels 5 through 7, levels 2 through 4 will also want to follow, because 5 through 7 will be role models for those other guys. So key question here, or actually key question you might be asking now is, what can women do to find these male allies, right? What do you look for? So here's some suggestions I have. Are they open and willing to learn? Do they ask questions? Are they actively listen? Do they actively listen? Do they mentor and sponsor women? Is something else to look for. Do they hire and promote women? Do they have a diverse team? And finally, do they verbally advocate for women and others? So those are just a few things to look for in seeking male allies. And then how can men be better allies? Do everything I just mentioned. Do the above, basically. Listen, mentor, sponsor, hire. I have that on the next slide here. And then we need to also help men think broader about equity. We need to help men to embrace diversity more. We also need to help men to recognize that their position, which may be a position of privilege, can drive real change. It really can drive real change. And that's a good position to be in. And then finally, understand the benefits to being an ally. And I have that here for you. So here are things men can do: hire, mentor, sponsor, coach, support, include, develop, listen to, promote women. There's tons of things men can do to be better allies and support women. We also need men to commit to changing the leadership ratios, commit to fairness, and commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, if men do that, this is the really cool part. There are studies linking every one of these to men who support women. So men become better listeners, more empathetic, more self-aware. They have larger networks. They're viewed as valued rainmakers, for example. More effective leader, respected by their peers. They help their company's bottom line. And the loftiest one, be a better husband and father. So there's lots of positivity around here, around this topic. And if we're able to have more male allyship, it helps men, women, and companies. So it's a win-win-win. So this is how we get there, is through dialogue and discussion. Talking can transform minds, which can transform our behaviors. When our behaviors change, that can transform our companies. And when that happens, we can transform the world. So together, we can use our superpowers. We can work with men and women together. And with that, thank you very much.